information on the guide, you can visit hays.ca/salary guide. And without further ado, I'll hand over to your host, Jim Fearon.
Thanks, Caitlin. Hello, everyone, and depending on where you are in Canada today, good morning or afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, where we'll share with you the results from our survey of employers for 2017 across Canada. My name is Jim Fearon, as Caitlin just said. Oh, sorry, bear with me 2 seconds. Sorry about that. My name is Jim Fearon. I'm the VP of our Western and Central regions at Hays Canada. I've worked for Hays for almost 19 years, 5.5 of which have been here in Calgary. I'm also joined by Russ Carnley, Alyssa Monk and Bob Bracalenti, who are all senior managers in our businesses. But between them, they have nearly 40 years experience recruiting and construction and are responsible for our businesses in Vancouver, Calgary and Mississauga, respectively. We'll have you for approximately 30 to 35 minutes to share the results of the survey, with about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So you can send in questions as we go along, or wait until the end, and we'll try to cover as many of those as possible. Okay, so just to start with a little about the survey. As most of you know, we produce an annual salary guide which shows typical salaries paid across a selection of industries and functional areas, cross-referenced for level of experience and the type of company the role may be found in. The salaries are based on what we see every day in the roles we fill and from the candidates we meet, and it's become an invaluable reference tool for literally thousands of hiring managers across the country, and we're very proud of its simplicity and user-friendliness. If you want to receive a copy of the 2017 guide, go to hays.ca and you can request a copy there, and we'll get one out to you as quickly as we can. In addition to the guide, we also survey our clients about the hiring plans, salary changes, business activity forecasts, and their confidence in the economy. This year, we've included up to 5 years of data to show trends in the job market, which puts us in a position to see things that others can't and allows us to provide valuable advice and recommendations to our clients and candidates alike. Today's webinar will look at the general market and where the construction industry falls within that market, so a comparison against all industry sectors. This year, the survey was completed by 4,000 hiring managers, HR professionals, and business leaders across the country, covering 16 different industries or sectors and 20 functional areas. I'll pull out regional industry differences and variances as we go along for comparison's sake. Okay, so let's start with the headlines. Corporate Canada's confidence in the economic stability recovers to 2013 levels. Business activity forecasts return to 2014 level. Hiring and compensation is not expected to increase in line with business activity just yet. Recruitment, retention, and employee development efforts must be targeted to align with business needs. And employers rely on temporary and contract workers for productivity, but many are not getting the most from this resource. More specifically, some construction highlights. Business activity forecasts are slightly less than the national average, although they're more positive about the economy in general. Hiring is expected to increase in line with business activity, which is different to what we saw for Canada overall, and more employers are considering increasing their compensation package to retain senior employees. Right, let's start out with a look at this year's overall market trends. When we're looking at the salary guide results, we always start with feelings about the economy in general and whether people think it'll get weaker, stronger, or stay the same. This graph shows employers' economic outlook over the last 4 years, and you can see there's a lot of change. The dark blue line is how many people thought the economy would strengthen in the next year. The light blue is how many people think it'll weaken, and the orange is those that think it'll stay the same. So in 2015, we saw the most confidence yet. Almost half of people thought the economy would strengthen, and in that pink circle you can see that more people said it would strengthen than actually stay the same. Now, to be fair, we run the survey in mid to late October, so what we probably didn't capture that year was how confidence would be badly hit by the free fall in the oil price early in 2015, although you can clearly see it reflected in 2016 with that dark blue line showing that the number saying the economy would improve dropped by half. Asking now about the outlook for 2017, you can see a slight improvement. The dark blue line's past 30%, so roughly one third of employers are saying the economy will strengthen in 2017, and the light blue line is back below 20%, so it's still nowhere near where it was in 2015, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. So what's driving this change, and is it different across the various regions in Canada? Well, looking at this regionally, it's mostly good news. You can see that in BC and Ontario on the left, the dark blue line stayed above the light blue line for the last 3 years. So while confidence took a hit for 2016, it rebounded to some extent this year with an improvement. In BC, that's over 40% of employers saying the economy will strengthen, and in Ontario, it's over 30% saying likewise. Looking at Alberta in the top right, there's a lot of change over the last 3 years. You've got the well-documented change from boom to bust, shown from 2015 to 2016. Last year, almost 40% of people said the economy would weaken. This year, that's improved by 10 points, and now under 30% are saying it would continue to weaken. 20% think it will improve, which is up from 15% last year. So it's an improvement there as people hope that the worst is behind them and that the oil price will continue to recover. News on pipelines is sure to help, and we'll see what impact that has, as potentially will the agreement that OPEC have on reducing production. Having said that, Alberta is still the least optimistic of the provinces, but it's looking a little better. Finally, Quebec, there's some major changes here. So last year we saw a significant change for the worse, with the number of people feeling the economy would strengthen dropping from 40% to 20%. But this year it's a total bounce back to 40% again. I'm not sure why this is so pronounced, to be frank. I think that Quebec would respond more, I wouldn't think that Quebec would respond more to the Alberta changes than other provinces did. I know we had a far bigger participation in the survey this year than in previous years, so maybe it's something to do with the sample size. But either way, the outlook is very positive for 2017 and very similar to BC. So overall, every region showing an uptick in confidence to some degree or other. So how does the construction industry see the year ahead? Well, on the whole, employers are more positive than average, with 38% saying the economy will strengthen and only 17% worried that it could weaken. I think this reflects the strong construction sectors that we've seen over the majority of the country over the last 5 years, and would probably be far more bullish if it weren't for worries pervading the markets within Alberta and Saskatchewan because of the oil and gas downturn. So that was all about the economy in general. How about what people are saying about their own businesses? So the colours here are the same as earlier. So dark blue means that business activity increased, and where it's striped, that's the prediction for that year, if that makes sense. So let's start with what did happen in 2016. You can see that half of employers say business activity increased, up 3 points from 2015, and 27% say it stayed the same. In the shaded bars beside those figures, you can see that the expectation had been for 2016, and it's very similar. So 57% expected an increase, and 50% got one. How about the year ahead? Well, over 60% of employers are saying that they expect increases next year, which is about a 5-point increase on the same question last year, and approaching the peak level here that we had in 2014, when 60% actually experienced an increase in business activity levels. So let's see if we can get back to that level in 2017. Either way, being able to say that 50% of companies saw an increase last year and over 60% expect one this year is a pretty positive and confident story for Canada's businesses. Okay, again, breaking this down by region, overall you can see a lot of confidence here. In BC, over 60% of companies saying business has increased in 2016, up from 55% in 2015, and even higher than 2014. And looking ahead, almost 70% are expecting improvement in 2017. So there's excellent news in BC. Ontario said they saw increases in 2016, up from 51% the previous year, and almost 70% are feeling good about next year, so very similar to BC. And Quebec, similar again, 55% saw improvements last year and a steady improvement over the previous 2 years. And again, 70% are expecting next year to be even better. So outside of Alberta, roughly 70% of employers are saying they expect business level activities to increase. And so let's focus on the outlier, Alberta. You can see that 2015 there was the impact year, with 50% seeing a slowdown in business activity. In 2016, that's changed. Now only 25% saying that they got worse this year, or things got slower for them this year. And over half said that it was pretty steady going for them. That was in stark contrast to what people had actually expected in the year. So it was better than they thought it was going to be. And then for the year ahead in Alberta, it's a split decision, so just over 40% saying it will improve and just under 40% saying steady as she goes. And based on this, things are significantly different in Alberta than elsewhere, but certainly improving very much from where they or we were. Now, the backdrop to all of this, obviously, is the oil and gas market. So in a second, we'll look at how much of an impact everyone feels that's having on their business. But first, let's take a look at how business activity expectations compare specifically within the construction sector. So construction activity was almost exactly aligned to the overall results, with about half seeing an increase this year and a quarter remaining the same and a quarter decreasing. For 2017, nearly 60% are expecting an increase in activity and only 15% are predicting a decrease. Now, at the ground level, we're seeing that most construction markets are very, very busy, with only Alberta and Saskatchewan showing the signs of any sort of major or significant slowdown. There's still plenty of construction going on in both those markets, but with ground getting broken on far fewer projects in 2016 and even less new developments getting funding and coming through the design phase, there's the potential that that could turn into more trouble for us potentially in 2018. So we'll have to see how that develops there. Now let's see the impact of oil and gas. We asked all employers about how the oil and gas downturn is affecting them, and 38% of them said it either negatively or very negatively affected their outlook for the coming 12 months. In the construction industry, 46% say it affected their business activity, and of those, 40% of them were outside Alberta, which shows that whilst the downturn was felt most significantly in Alberta, it certainly wasn't exclusively there. So which industries are doing well across Canada? Well, we asked what the strongest performing sector would be, and unsurprisingly to us, banking, construction, and IT and telecommunications were the top three. Public sector is in there and is unsurprisingly still strong, and we're seeing some more investment from the Liberal governments provincially and federally. And finally, pharmaceuticals and life sciences sectors, which is one of the most optimistic for 2017, with a lot of pharma employers saying they'll increase in activity next year. So we've got an improvement in general economic confidence in most places. Alberta's stepping away from the precipice in particular. Employers are feeling more confident about their own business and expecting it to improve. So overall, it's a pretty good story. So what effect is this having on hiring? Let's start with looking at permanent hiring plans. When we surveyed employers last year, 35% of people expected headcount to increase in 2016, and 15% said it would decrease. When we asked them how 2016 actually turned out, 31% said that it increased, so pretty close, but far more than expected, had actually decreased headcount. In 2017, you can see the expectations are similar, maybe a little bit more optimistic than last year. So if the outcomes are also similar, we'll see a few more people growing or maintaining headcount, but probably still about a quarter decreasing headcount. The interesting thing here is the consistency. So for 4 years, we've got about the same percentage, so 35% of employers adding permanent headcount. That's amidst significant changes in economic confidence and changes in business activities. So what's really happening? And I'd say it's potentially two things. So firstly, since 2008, there's not been a prolonged period of economic confidence, growth, and stability. And if it isn't one thing going wrong, it's another. So more recently, it's been the oil price. Next time, maybe it could be changes to the NAFTA agreement. Who knows? But we believe that Canadian employers are cautious because of this, and probably rightly so. And secondly, it's basically good business decision-making from Canadian business leaders. So if things are looking up, it's an opportunity to improve productivity and profit margins. Plus, when things turn down a little, you haven't over-invested, so you don't need to make major cuts to your organization. So it's a canniness, if you like. But I'd say it's working pretty well for the economy as a whole. Once we have another couple of years of steady growth, it'll be interesting to see if hiring picks up a bit and maybe gets back over that 35% line again. A final point on permanent hiring here, and what this graph doesn't really say, is that employers are targeting their hiring on very specific skill sets. So I'd go so far as to say that every single company is hiring for something right now, and by that I mean they know that if they see, for example, a senior estimator with 7 to 10 years experience, with strong high-rise commercial experience in either Toronto or Vancouver, then they'll hire them regardless of what's happening, as these are very hard people to find. And I think the same goes for virtually every industry in every province. Okay, and regional trends really look very similar. They're steady year on year, except Alberta again, which isn't surprising. BC and Quebec are most confident in increasing headcount, whilst most employers in Ontario are expecting to keep things steady. So going by region, BC in the top left is incredibly steady and positive every year, 40% adding more people. While economic confidence took a bit of a hit last year, it really didn't impact hiring at all. For 2017, it's looking even more positive again. In Alberta, you can see that more than 45% of employers have reduced permanent headcount in the last 2 years, although looking ahead, most employers in Alberta are hoping to keep headcount steady. So whether that is what will happen or not shall remain to be seen, but you'd say with the change in economic confidence and business activity levels, it seems like the worst is behind them, touch wood, fingers crossed. In the bottom left, you can see that Ontario is planning to keep headcount largely steady, again following a pattern that's been fairly consistent for the last 3 years. For 2017, majority saying they'd like to hold steady again. And then finally in Quebec in the bottom right, we've seen a bit of a fluctuation in the last few years and actually saw fewer companies decrease headcount last year compared to 2015. Looking ahead, they're almost as confident as BC, with half planning to increase permanent staff numbers. And again, how does the construction industry compare with the overall figures? Well, we see that the construction employers are falling right in line with the cross-industry numbers for their hiring over the past year. However, the coming year, they seem to be a bit more optimistic in their thoughts of increasing headcount in 2017. However, the skills shortage is definitely still challenging employers looking for more staff, and I wonder how much of an impact that'll have on their ability to actually increase headcount. A quick look at temporary hiring. That very high orange bar indicates that most employers expect to keep temp use consistent with last year, very few decreasing and less than 1/5 increasing temporary or contract headcount. About 55% of employers say they do use temporary workers, and this number has increased each year over the last 5 years due to business activity levels increasing, but really a reluctance to overcommit with permanent hiring. So more companies moving towards the use of temps and contractors, but those that do planning on keeping the use at the same level. We can see here that the construction industry also expects their contract hiring practices to stay fairly similar in the coming year as it did last year. Typically, we see roughly 45% of construction companies like to use temps or contractors to augment their permanent workforce, and there's been no significant change on this over the last few years. Given the skills shortage that the industry has faced over that time, we always wonder whether there's an opportunity being missed to effectively use temps and contractors to alleviate productivity challenges, particularly when focusing on niche skill sets. So now looking at the skills shortage, how is the talent mismatch in Canada affecting business? So overall, 58% of employers say that Canada has a skills shortage, which is pretty high, but in construction, the number's significantly higher at 72%, and 78% of them say it directly affects them, as opposed to 67% across all industries. These numbers are a little lower than last year, when 61% of all employers said there was a skills shortage and 75% said it affected them, and really that's a result of the oil and gas downturn and the Alberta market, where that industry has found things a bit easier, and they actually had the toughest hiring markets prior to that. We asked employers whether the downturn had affected their hiring, and 25% said they'd been able to hire faster due to the downturn, so there's always a bright side, I suppose. Asked about the main reason for the shortage and how this has changed versus last year, slightly more employers are blaming things like people not entering the industry, people relocating, and people leaving the industry. The Hays Global Skills Index highlighted the talent mismatch as a serious concern in Canada. We have the people, but the people don't necessarily have the skills that we need, and the index recommends the index recommendations include implementing targeted training, as well as improving mobility between industries where that's possible. The lack of training and professional development remains the biggest concern, and investing in this will take input from employers, government, industry groups, and educational institutions, and we'll take a look at this a little bit more in a second. So in the skills short market, how are employers actually attracting talent? We asked, what are you doing to attract top talent? the number one answer was offering competitive salaries. But I think we say this every year, which is that meeting market rate is important, but only one company can pay the top dollar. So you have to be able to compete on other things. The two least common attraction tools are promoting career progression and training and development, even though these are considered very, very important for both recruitment and retention. In fact, when we ask what employers' main retention challenges are, they say it's career progression. This is followed by the competitive market, and by that I mean how they keep others from poaching their top talent, and then salary actually comes in third. And everything else really just drops off. It's nowhere near as important. So people are leaving jobs because they're not getting career progression, and the people leaving for that reason are likely your best people because they're ambitious and your competitors are looking for them. So are you doing enough to keep them? This is the question you have to ask, I think. Well, 64% don't have or don't know if they have a succession plan. That means 1/3 do, which is actually up 10% from last year, which is a good sign, and a further 20% are in the process of implementing one. So there's definitely a portion of the market and employers that are taking this very seriously. However, when we look at the construction industry, it actually looks better, as only 43% don't have a succession plan, showing that this industry is taking this industry is getting better prepared than the general employer. If you don't have a succession plan or aren't putting one in place, then it's unlikely you'll be able to provide the long-term career progression required for retaining high potential employees, and that's probably those 10% who are making the biggest difference day to day and could be your future leaders. The construction industry continues to challenge the labour market. I don't think there's really any surprises here on what's highest in demand, with estimators and project managers leading the way, as they have every year for the last few years, and it's really across the vast majority of the construction disciplines, so multi-family home development, commercial and civil construction. Right, so how do we address less people entering the industry, as that was highlighted as a significant problem? If you look at the donut chart on the right, the biggest segments represent lack of awareness in university and college and the industry's perception of stereotypes. Those are both an issue of people either not knowing about the industry at all or simply having misconceptions about it. So if you combine the lack of awareness in university with the dark blue segment representing lack of awareness in grade school, then more than a third of employees say young people are not learning about their industry in the stage of life when they're starting to think about careers. So what can we do about this? We asked who is responsible for tackling this issue, and 35% of employers say they are, which I think is very promising. The remaining 65% spread responsibility across the government, educational bodies and industry groups. And to be fair, I do think that this is an issue that requires a joined-up solution, but every organisation needs to be thinking about how they overcome it as an issue for themselves. So now to the crux of the guide, how is all this affecting salaries? So on this graph, you've got 5 years of salary trends. The dark blue is how many people did not increase salaries. Orange is increased by 3% or less, and the light blue is increased by more than 3%. The short version of this slide is more and more of a conservative approach. So the trends are more companies each year offering 0 increase, more companies each year offering a less than 3% increase, and less companies each year offering a more than 3% increase. If we look at the light blue bars, you can see that since 2013 it's gone down from 40% offering more than 3% in 2013 to just 27% last year, and under 20% saying it for this year. So that's quite a trend developing there. And then the dark blue bar, in 2013, 15% of companies said no increase this year, and in 2016 that became a far more prevalent concept, with 25% saying no increase. The orange bar represents companies saying yes to an increase, but keeping it below 3%, and that's the most common approach. Again, since 2013, there's a trend towards that, so around 45% offering it in 2013, and in 2016, that number growing to 55%. So over the last 5 years, we've seen more companies offering either no increase or less than 3%. Now, that's against the backdrop of increases and decreases in confidence and in business activity, such a clear trend may look a little bit at odds with the ups and downs of the market. So how come this isn't changing with the ups and downs of the economy? And I'd say it's for exactly the same reason, as we're not seeing any significant changes in hiring. So we haven't seen a few years of consistent economic growth across the country and across industries for approaching 10 years now, and people are cautious, and I think it's as simple as that, and they're probably right to be cautious. Another point to add is that almost 20% of companies said that they are able to offer lower than usual compensation due to the economic downturn, so this is reducing pressure to increase salaries in some areas or industries in the country. Now, I think I've described all of that in a fairly negative way and that it's bad news for your pocket, but to spin it slightly differently, I'd say that 81% of employers say they'll increase salaries next year and point out that fewer are planning a zero change in 2017. So I think it's actually good news on the whole. So as we can see here, the construction industry is fairly similar in how their salaries were increased as those we saw in the previous slide. So 40% offered an increase to allow the cost of living last year, if that makes sense. And that's expected to increase to 44% next year. Or to put it another way, 25% are planning on offering no increase at all in 2017, but 75% are planning an increase at some level. I'd say the vast majority of those planning no increase are probably in Alberta or Saskatchewan, certainly affected by the oil and gas market. So, excuse me. So the previous slide was a catch-all, i.e. plans that cover every employee. What we want to see is if companies are using a two-speed approach to salaries and asked whether you're willing to change compensation plans to attract top talent. So in that dark blue wedge, you can see that 20% of employers say, yes, we have done that. Another almost 5% are saying they plan to do so in the coming year, and another 30% are saying they haven't done but would be willing to do it for the right person. So that's a total of 64% saying they would or are willing to change their salary plans to attract specific people. This is similar to the approach on hiring, so overall it's conservative, but when it comes to specific skill sets, a very different and more aggressive approach. Looking at the chart below, the grey and blue shows where people are feeling wage pressure, so you can see it is highest at the mid or senior level. Overall, more than 60% are feeling at least some wage pressure at these levels, and almost as many say they're experiencing it at director level and above. So I predict we'll see employers giving really targeted compensation increases to the employees who are the most important to retain, so those 10% that are their top people who drive the results and are the future leaders of the company, and then probably more conservative increases for the rest of their business. But does that align with what people are actually expecting? And 2/3 of people say they expect to get a salary increase next year. Now, not surprisingly, this number doesn't really change much year on year. Last year it was about 68%, but only just over half actually got a pay rise. So that expectation wasn't met, and I don't think everyone needs to get a pay rise every year, but if you're not increasing salaries, then you need to be communicating with employees about why, and look at other areas of improvement, such as benefits, which nicely leads us on to benefits, and what are you missing from your benefits plans? So we've talked a lot about targeted attraction, and I think your benefits package is one of the best ways to stand out. We asked employees what benefits were most valuable to them, and these are the top 5. So we've got vacation, performance bonuses, pension and RRSP support, training and development, and flexible work hours. The top benefit is always vacation. Time and time again after we survey people, we know for a fact that more vacation time is the only benefit that will make people accept a lower salary, so it's clearly very important. Anyway, these represent opportunities for you to stand out and offer candidates what they actually want and what they're looking for from their employees, but how many employers are actually doing that? Well, 56% of employers offer more than 2 weeks to new hires, just under half offer bonuses, and 52% offer pension or RRSP support. We've mentioned the importance of training and development, yet only 47% of employers include it in their package or view it as part of their package, and finally, 49% offer flexible work options. So again, these are all opportunities. If you can offer more of these than you're doing, or more than your competitors, then you're going to make yourself stand out from the crowd. What are employers planning on doing next year? These are the benefits that employers are planning to add next year, though in honesty they're in fairly small numbers, so about 5% of employers plan to add flexible work options, for example, but more employers are looking for more ways to differentiate themselves. The fact that the two lists are identical means that employers know what people are looking for, which is definitely a good thing, so they have the information they need to enhance their packages. However, there is one big missing piece, and that is training and development support is not in the top 5. It's actually not even in the top 10 rather, of what employers plan to add next year. Less than 2% of employers say they're adding this to attract or retain talent. So if you're not training to get the skills you need, and you're not training to address productivity issues, and you don't include training in your benefits as a recruitment and retention tool, then you're really missing out on a very important and strategically important opportunity. I think one barrier to doing this is that people see training as an expensive exercise, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You can bring in an external trainer for half a day, or organise lunch and learns, or set up an internal mentorship program to help pass knowledge on. Really, it depends on just the simple needs of your business, but there are lots of ways that you can offer training no matter your company size or budget, and we strongly believe that you need some sort of response to the need for this from your employees. It's very, very clear. Right, so that's just about everything covered. We'll just finish off with a brief summary of our key findings and some recommendations. To start off with the key findings, confidence in the economy is improving. Employers outside of Alberta are optimistic for future business activity, and Alberta is hoping for modest improvement. Employers are using contingent workers to manage workloads but don't have visibility on those resources. Skills shortages are top of employer concerns, and most are focused on compensation and benefits to attract talent. And salary increases of less than 3% persist, with employers targeting increases to get and keep the best talent. And then our recommendations. Target hiring to the roles that will make the biggest difference to your organisation, but monitor workloads to ensure key staff are not overburdened. Take a two-speed approach for compensation reviews. General increases of 1 to 2% will keep you competitive, but use targeted increases of 3 to 6% to retain top performers. Add training as a benefit to engage and retain high potential employees and to grow your own experts. If you're not sure what to expect from the year, consider using temporary or contract resources to keep up with changes. And create a talent pipeline, even if you're not currently hiring, by developing your employer brand online and being in front of potential talent. Okay, so that's the end of the key messages we wanted to share today. Thank you very much for dialing in and listening. I hope you found it useful and that you got at least 1 or 2 constructive ideas from it. We now have a couple of minutes to spare to answer any questions, as I said at the beginning. So if you do have a question, please type it into the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer it. As I said, I've got Russ, Alyssa, and Bob with us to help answer any questions that come along. Just to go over a couple more things. So the soft copy of the guide will be available from January the 16th, at which time we'll send out a copy by email. If you'd like a hard copy, feel free to reach out to your local Hays office with a request. We'll also have a recording of this webinar available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So let's have a quick look and see whether we have any questions. It does appear as though we've got some being typed through. So I've got one here that I'm actually going to throw out to Bob and Alyssa. I might have my own things to throw into it as well. We've been trying to attract people out of the Albertan market to come and work for us in Toronto, but haven't anywhere near the success we thought we'd have, largely we think due to the cost of living. Do you have any thoughts on this? Bob, do you want to?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. 100% true. Cost of living is high in Toronto, but I think like some of the objections or concerns of people that we're trying to attract to the area. First of all, it's a huge area. There's over 6 million people, so not everybody is living in the high-priced downtown core. And I think if you're trying to attract people from Alberta, the biggest sell is the opportunities. There's attractive senior level roles. There's roles that offer some growth, some training, succession plans. I think the biggest thing is when trying to attract these candidates, it's really important to outline the entirety of the opportunities available to them, because sometimes people make decisions on limited info. And it really is, the GTA has been stable for the longest time, and infrastructure and high-rise has almost an insatiable need for qualified candidates.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Bob.
I think to add to that from an Albertan point of view, one of the biggest things is all about how, and piggybacking off of what Bob had said, it's about communicating what the long-term opportunity is. You know, Albertans, I would say, typically would consider things on a long-term opportunity, and developing marketing material and really understanding what your brand proposition is and what you could offer somebody from Alberta, not just about where they're living, but, you know, the overall package of what you'd be looking at, the project opportunities, developing marketing material in the way that you write your job ads and how you and where you put those job ads in terms of where you're advertising them, will also have a bigger impact if there's a bit more thought put into that process. And
you say it's fair to say that the top talent's still gainfully employed in Alberta at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. There's, you know, we're kind of seeing the construction industry in Alberta. I would say there's definitely been a number of rounds of layoffs with some companies, but the top people are pretty much still gainfully employed. That being said, though, you know, next year and early next year might be a slightly different tale to tell.
Fair enough. Okay, so start branding now and marketing now, maybe you can start picking up the top people as they come off jobs in 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So I hope that answers that question. We've got a question here. Are you able to provide a salary range at this time for health and safety and environment professionals in Alberta, and for that matter, across Canada?
Okay, so I would say that is actually an area of the business that has been very, very affected by oil and gas, and therefore prices have dropped dramatically. Salaries have dropped dramatically. I mean, we're seeing, you know, $50,000 to $60,000 where clients are actually offering those kinds of salaries at the moment because of the surplus of people in that industry. That being said, though, people with, you know, a lot of years of commercial construction experience behind them, I would say have higher expectations and are probably more around that 100,000 mark because they have that relevant industry experience. But I can certainly give more detail offline. If I can get some contact details from whoever asked that question, I can definitely give a few more examples as to what we're seeing at the moment.
And I think the easiest way to get that specific answer, on the 19th of December, I think you can get a hard copy of the salary guide, and that information will be in there in black and white. So just reach out to your local office and they can have a copy delivered to you on the 19th or maybe the 20th, so you can get that information for yourself. We have a comment that I'll read out. So this is from somebody who's based in Alberta. It's interesting about the training piece. Consider the Canada Alberta Job Grant is available for funding of training for employers. So there's a very useful piece of information that's been shared. I've got one other question below that. I'm based in Vancouver. The biggest challenge I have from a recruitment and retention perspective is top-notch superintendents. I'd have to confess to not really having a plan, any sort of plan in place to fix this. So what would you recommend? And I'll throw that over to Russ, given that he is in Vancouver.
Okay, so firstly, I would say people need to be proactive. We deal with a number of clients who essentially start looking to find a superintendent when a client has signed on the dotted line. So I think really you need to be much more proactive than that. Start meeting people, develop a pipeline of superintendents that you're already speaking to before you have the need, essentially, because you don't want to be hiring someone. I'd certainly have question marks about hiring someone who will just walk off a project midway through. So obviously there's a lot of things that need to align to enable you to get someone. And another thing that you might need to consider, because I know there's obviously budgetary considerations, you may need to hire someone prior to the project starting, double stacking them on a job if you have the opportunity to do so. Let them get up to speed with how you do things, if you could cover some of the cost that way. And other thing just that may avoid people needing to hire is what we tend to find is site staff can feel like a bit of an island. Like we tend to find turnover is much higher for superintendent positions. So I think just being really proactive with making sure your superintendents feel like part of the company, they're invited into the office, they're included on training, and things like that would be a good way to avoid you needing to continually be hiring if you could improve your retention also.
And I'd add to that sorry, Russ, we know for a fact that one of the issues that's talked widely about in Vancouver is that the vast majority of organisations lack sort of any formal or structured succession plans, and I know that the VRCA has been sort of beating the drum around that point for some time, and the idea of succession planning can seem like a fairly difficult topic to get your head around, but in essence, if you know that something like superintendents in particular is a significant issue for you, then your succession plan is simply as simple as identifying a number of people in your current business that you think have the potential to progress into superintendent roles or into senior superintendent roles, and then talking to them about the fact that you see that potential in them, and then providing them some sort of training, guidance, mentorship, and actually giving them exposure to more senior responsibilities and elevating them a little bit. Not necessarily fully, but at times just so that they sort of get a feel for step up in responsibility. So it doesn't have to be very complicated. It can be a relatively straightforward thing, but it starts off with identifying an issue and then seeing who in your organisation potentially could grow into that role over the next number of years. So I think that would be my addition to that. But that's it. That's all the questions we have at this stage. Unless there's any last ones that come through, I'd like to say just thank you again for dialing in. I hope you've found something of use in the guide, and as I said, hard copies are available from the 19th of December, so we can get them delivered out to you that week if you request one, or you can wait till January the 16th and download a soft copy then. If you have any further questions and you wanted to email them through to me, my email address is right there. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for dialing in.